We are looking at Strive Inc., ticker symbol ASST, trading live right now at exactly $1.02. The stock is currently flat on the day, showing virtually 0% movement since the opening bell, though we saw a flicker of pre-market activity pushing it as high as $1.04 earlier this morning. While the chart right now might look like a flat line, do not let that stillness fool you. This lack of volatility at the open is often the calm before a very specific type of storm, especially when you consider the massive volume churning beneath the surface. Most investors looking at this chart see a penny stock hovering near $1, perhaps assuming it is just another struggling small-cap tech company trying to find its footing. The expectation here is low. People see the ticker ASST. They remember the old asset entities business model regarding digital marketing and Discord communities, and they write it off as irrelevant. But the reality is violently different. What you are actually looking at is not a marketing firm anymore. It is potentially the early stages of a MicroStrategy-style Bitcoin treasury play, backed by some of the most high-profile names in the financial and political world. The discrepancy between what the average retail trader thinks this company is and what it has actually become is where the opportunity and the danger lies. Let's look at the immediate price action we have seen today. That opens at roughly 96 cents, and the subsequent push back over the $1 psychological level is critical. When a stock like this reclaims and holds the $1 mark, it is often defending against delisting fears and establishing a new floor for institutional entry. The volume we are seeing, over 88 million shares traded recently, tells us that money is not just flowing in, it is rotating. We are seeing a changing of the guard from old shareholders who held the legacy business to new, aggressive capital betting on the Bitcoin treasury thesis. This churn at $1.02 represents a battleground. If the bulls can hold this level, it validates the pivot. If they fail, we could see a flush back down to the mid-90s. Now, why is this happening? To understand the movement, you have to understand the fundamental shift in identity here. Strive Inc. is the result of a reverse merger involving Strive Enterprises, co-founded by Vivek Ramaswamy. The market is trying to price in a completely new business model. This is no longer about social media engagement, it is about unapologetic capitalism, and more importantly, accumulating Bitcoin on the balance sheet. The recent news that Strive is merging with Semler Scientific, another company that aggressively pivoted to Bitcoin, has essentially turned this ticker into a leveraged bet on the future of cryptocurrency adoption by corporations. You are not buying a company's cash flow here. You are buying a vehicle that is issuing equity to hoard digital assets. This brings us to the short-selling dynamic, which is absolutely critical for anyone holding this stock to understand. When a company pivots this hard, and when the price spikes on hype, the short sellers arrive in droves. Currently, ASST is seeing significant short pressure. The borrow rates on this stock, the cost short sellers pay to borrow shares to sell them, have likely spiked, which is typical for microcaps undergoing such a massive transformation. You need to watch the days to cover metric. If that number starts creeping up, it means the shorts are trapped. However, be very careful. Short sellers in this range are betting that the Bitcoin treasury narrative is just hot air and that the company will dilute shareholders into oblivion to pay for that Bitcoin. Speaking of dilution, this is the double-edged sword of the Strive model. To buy Bitcoin, they have to raise capital. They recently announced a massive preferred stock offering and equity financing. This means more shares are hitting the market, which technically dilutes the value of your existing shares. This is why the stock is pinned at $1.02 instead of flying to $5 right now. The market is digesting that new supply. The bulls argued that this dilution is accretive, meaning the Bitcoin they buy with that money will appreciate faster than the stock value they diluted. The bears argue it's a death spiral. This tension is what keeps the price locked in this tight channel today. Let's take a step back and look at the company's legacy to understand how we got here. Asset Entities, the company that originally traded under this ticker, was a provider of digital marketing services focusing heavily on Generation Z through Discord servers and TikTok. It was a niche business, interesting but small. The merger with Strive Enterprises wiped the slate clean. Strive Asset Management, the subsidiary, manages over $2 billion in assets. They built their name on challenging the ESG, environmental, social, and governance movement, pushing instead for maximizing shareholder value above all else. By merging into a public shell like ASST, they bypassed the traditional IPO process, allowing them to tap into public markets faster. The recent filing regarding the merger with Semler Scientific is the catalyst. Everyone is whispering about this. Semler was a medical device company that famously decided to start putting its cash reserves into Bitcoin. By combining Strive and Semler, the goal is to create a massive consolidated entity that holds thousands of Bitcoin. The headline number, purchasing over 5,000 Bitcoin at an average price well into the six figures, shows the scale of their ambition. This isn't a pilot program. This is an all-in bet. When you see the stock flickering at $1.02, you have to ask yourself, is the market underestimating the sheer value of that Bitcoin hoard, or is it correctly pricing in the execution risk? I want to pause here and ask you guys a question because this divides the financial community right down the middle. Comment below with your take. Do you think companies like Strive and Semler becoming Bitcoin treasury proxies is a brilliant financial evolution, or is it just a dangerous way to gamble with shareholder money? I really want to know if you see this as the future of finance or just a bubble within a bubble. Now back to the market mechanics. We need to talk about the retail sentiment because that is what drives momentum in stocks like this. If you look at discussions on platforms like X and Reddit, the sentiment is a mix of confusion and extreme bullishness. The Vivek effect cannot be ignored. Vivek Ramaswamy has a massive following, and his involvement brings a level of retail attention that a standard microcap would never get. Retail traders are looking for the next microstrategy, the next stock that correlates with Bitcoin but offers more leverage. The chatter online suggests that many are holding ASST as a lottery ticket, hoping that a surge in Bitcoin prices will send this stock parabolic. However, you must be aware of the fail-to-deliver data. In stocks with this much turnover and structural change, sometimes the plumbing of the market gets clogged. High fail-to-deliver numbers can indicate that short sellers are naked shorting, selling shares they haven't located, or that the settlement process is lagging behind the massive volume. If you see a sudden spike in price without any news, it could be a forced buy-in, where market makers are clearing these fails. This creates artificial buying pressure that has nothing to do with the company's fundamentals and everything to do with market structure. Let's look at the sector momentum. The broader financial sector, specifically the crypto-adjacent equities, has been volatile. When Bitcoin moves 1%, stocks like ASST can move 5 or 10%. This is called beta. ASST effectively acts as a high beta derivative of Bitcoin. If Bitcoin crashes, this stock could arguably go to zero or back to its cash value. If Bitcoin rallies, the leverage effect could send it to multiples of its current price. Today's flat action at $1.02 suggests that Bitcoin itself is likely consolidating or that the market is waiting for the next regulatory headline. We also need to consider the institutional landscape. Recently, we saw filings indicating that major funds and insiders are positioning themselves. Vivek buying $1.25 million worth of stock is a vote of confidence, but it's also a signal. Insiders usually buy for one reason. They think the price is going up. But institutions, the hedge funds and algos, are likely playing the volatility. They are scalping the pennies, buying at $1 and selling at $1.05. This algorithmic trading is what creates that barcoding effect you see on the intraday chart, where the price jumps back and forth between tight levels. For those of you watching the options chain, if it exists for this ticker, pay attention to the open interest. A high concentration of call options at the $2 or $5 strikes would act as a magnet, pulling the price upward as market makers hedge their exposure. Conversely, if the put volume is swelling, it means the street is betting on the deal falling through or the Bitcoin thesis failing. In the absence of a robust options market, we look at the pure equity volume, which, as I mentioned, is astronomical for a company of this market cap. One actionable insight for you right now: check the borrow fee rate at your broker. If you are using a standard retail brokerage, you might see that ASST is hard to borrow. When a stock is hard to borrow, it means the supply of shares available for shorting is drying up. This is often a precursor to a short squeeze, because if any positive news hits, like a new Bitcoin purchase or a regulatory approval, the shorts have literally nowhere to get shares to close their positions, forcing them to bid the price up vertically. The integration of Strive's anti-woke mission with the Bitcoin strategy is also a unique differentiator. Most companies buying Bitcoin are doing it purely for financial engineering. Strive is doing it as an ideological statement. They are betting against the centralized fiat system and the corporate governance models pushed by BlackRock. This narrative appeals to a very specific, very passionate demographic of investor. This cult stock potential is what gives ASST a premium. You are not just buying a balance sheet, you are buying membership in a movement. That is why the price support at $1 is so strong. Holders are ideologically committed, not just financially committed. But we must remain objective.